Year 1118, Jerusalem is a smoking ruin. European Christians are being massacred or crucified by the very people they come to convert. But as all seems lost, a small band of French knights rides to the rescue. This was the shocking scene when the First Crusade reached its bloody conclusion. And it would soon inspire the birth of one of history's most feared fighting forces, the Knights Templar. As the ashes settled over Jerusalem, a new order rose from the dust. Founded in 1118 by Hugues de Payens, a group of 9 French monks dedicated themselves to protecting Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Hugues, along with 8 of his fellow monks, rode out of Jerusalem and made a solemn oath before the high altar of the city's Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They swore to defend all Christian travelers on their way to the city, no matter the cost. Their mission was approved by Pope Honorius II, and the order quickly began accepting new recruits. Templars started as a collection of dispossessed French nobles who had been given land in exchange for their service in the Crusades. These men were then trained in the arts of war, becoming some of the fiercest fighters of the time. As more and more Templars joined the order, they gained favor with the Church and saw their power grow rapidly. Within decades, they had become some of the most recognized fighters in all of Christendom. By 1150, there were around 150,000 Templars spread across Europe and the Middle East. With such vast numbers, it's no surprise that Templars became the dominant force in the region. But their power didn't stop there. In fact, they were even able to influence the papacy itself. In 1155, Pope Eugene III issued the first of many papal decrees granting Templars full immunity from taxes. This made the order extremely wealthy and gave them even more power than before. By this point, Templars had become so powerful that they were practically a state within a state. They had their own military force, their own government, and their own currency. And they weren't afraid to use this power to get what they wanted. One of the most notorious examples of Templar greed is the Siege of Tripoli in 1189. The order was supposed to be protecting the city, but instead they attacked it. To make matters worse, they didn't even stop once they had taken the city. Templars pillaged and murdered anyone who got in their way until every last bit of treasure was gone. This kind of behavior didn't go over well with the general public. And soon enough, everyone was talking about how dangerous the Templars had become. However, not everyone hated the Templars. In fact, there were plenty of people who loved them. The most famous of these were the Assassins, an elite group of Muslim assassins who targeted Templar leaders and soldiers alike. The two groups were sworn enemies, and their clashes often resulted in massive battles. However, despite their ferocity in battle, the Templars were still seen as a positive force in society. After all, they were fighting to protect Christendom against the forces of darkness. But this image would soon change dramatically. In 1187, Saladin recaptured Jerusalem. This was a major blow to the Templars, who lost much of their territory in the Holy Land, but instead of giving up, they redoubled their efforts. They knew that if they could just hold on a little longer, reinforcements would arrive and they could take back what had been lost. And in 1192, their prayers were answered. Richard the Lionheart led an army of European Christians back to the Holy Land. This time, though, things would be different. Richard was a legendary warrior who inspired awe and terror in equal measure. He led the English and French armies to victory after victory, eventually recapturing Jerusalem. It seemed like the Templars had finally won the war. But in reality, it was just beginning. After Richard's death, Jerusalem fell back into Muslim hands. This time, the Templars were determined not to let it happen again. They built a series of massive castles and fortresses throughout the Holy Land, which served as bases for their soldiers. They also recruited more troops and amassed an impressive arsenal of weapons. The Templars were now better prepared than ever before, but they would need to be. The Muslim leader Saladin was planning something big. In 1199, Saladin launched an all-out assault on the Crusader states. For the next 3 years, the Templars fought desperately to hold on to their territory. But in 1202, they suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Arsuf. Although the Templars were able to retreat, they lost much of their equipment and supplies. This was a devastating blow, and it seemed like the end for the Templars. But somehow they managed to pull through. However, by this point, everyone could see that the Templars were no longer the powerhouse they once were. They were now just a shadow of their former selves, clinging to power by a thread. So in 1228, Pope Gregory IX decided to intervene. He created a new order called the Teutonic Order to replace the Templars in the Holy Land. This was a humiliating blow to the Templars, who had once been the most powerful fighting force in Christendom. Now they were being replaced by a bunch of German monks. The Templars tried to fight back, but it was no use. The Teutonic Order was simply too strong, and the Templars were forced to withdraw from the Holy Land. In 1244, the last Templar fortress fell and the order was officially dissolved. But although the Templars were gone, their legend lived on. People started to believe that Templars were actually secret bankers who had hidden all of their treasure in underground vaults. Some even went as far as to say that Templars were immortal and had survived the fall of their order. However, the truth is much more mundane. The Templars simply dissolved into the general population after their order was disbanded. Many of them found work as mercenaries, while others went back to living ordinary lives. A few even became criminals, using their skills to rob stagecoaches and waylay travelers. But these were just stories to scare children. The reality was that most Templars simply disappeared. With the decline of the Crusader states, the Holy Land was no longer important to European Christians. This meant that there was less need for a holy order dedicated to protecting pilgrims on their way there. Instead, the Templars focused on building up their wealth and power in Europe. By the late 12th century, the Templars had become one of the largest landowners in France and England. They owned dozens of castles and estates and had a huge annual income. But where did all this money come from? Well, much of it came from the nobles who entrusted the Templars with storing their money. When a noble went on crusade or to war, he would often turn his valuables over to the Templars to keep safe. This meant that the Templars had access to huge amounts of gold and silver, which they used to build up their wealth. They also took advantage of the many wars and conflicts in Europe to make money. Whenever there was a battle, the Templars were there to collect any treasure that was left behind. They were also not above charging exorbitant fees for their services. If you wanted the Templars to protect your land or your person, you had to pay up. But the Templars' wealth didn't just come from other people, they also made money on their own. By the 13th century, the Templars had become involved in banking and money lending. They charged high interest rates, but this was standard practice at the time. The Templars also lent money to kings and queens, often for very high interest rates. One of the most famous examples of this was the loan that the Templars made to King John of England in 1215. John needed money to buy back his kingdom from the French, and he was willing to pay whatever price was necessary. He borrowed 40,000 marks from the Templars, but he never paid it back. This, along with other debts, led to England's First Baronial War. While the Templars may have been ruthless businessmen, they were also surprisingly charitable. Throughout Europe, the Templars were in hospitals and inns for poor travelers. They also provided food and lodging for pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. This may seem contradicting, but it was common practice at the time. The Templars believed that God had given them wealth and power so that they could help others. This is probably why they were so beloved by the common people. While the nobility hated the Templars, the poor saw them as generous benefactors. But the Templars' good deeds did not save them from their ultimate fate. By the 13th century, the order was deeply unpopular. People accused them of all sorts of crimes, from raping women to robbing travelers. But the worst accusations were reserved for King Philip IV of France. He hated the Templars because they were a threat to his power. The order was so wealthy and influential that they could easily blackmail or overthrow him. Philip wanted the Templars gone, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. In 1307, Philip arrested over 500 Templars on charges of heresy and sodomy. This was obviously a frame-up, but it worked all too well. The Templars were paraded through the streets of Paris while people shouted, "Burn them, burn them." On Friday the 13th, the Templars were burned alive at the stake. The last Grand Master of the order, Jacques de Molay, was executed by order of Philip IV. He was charged with heresy and supposedly confessed to anti-Christian behavior before being burned at the stake. With the Templars gone, Philip IV consolidated his power and became one of the most influential monarchs in European history. He also profited from the dissolution of the order, gaining control of all of their property. But the Templars' story doesn't end here. There are plenty of theories out there that claim they survived their supposed demise. Some people even believe that the Templars are still active today, carrying on their mission to protect the Holy Land. Others believe that the Templars are secretly running the world, pulling the strings from the shadows. How crazy is that? Templars have also been the subject of many books and movies in recent years. The Da Vinci Code, for example, claims that the Templars were responsible for guarding the Holy Grail. There are also plenty of conspiracy theories out there that claim the Templars were actually aliens in disguise. Who knows? Maybe they were. Whatever happened to the Templars, one thing is for sure, their legend will live on forever. In the Middle Ages, they were feared as fierce warriors. In modern times, they are remembered as the unfortunate victims of a vicious king. Whatever the case may be, we can all agree that the Templars are one of the most interesting and enigmatic orders in history. So what do you think really happened to the Knights Templar? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing history. Thanks for watching.